Don't just stand there. Clear the plates. If you want to marry into this family, you need to first learn your place as a servant. Those were the humiliating words hurled at her by the very people who were supposed to welcome her. She cooked. She cleaned. She bowed her head, treated as nothing more than a maid in the house where she was meant to be a bride. They thought she was powerless. They thought she had nothing. But behind her silence was a truth they could never have imagined. A truth that, when revealed, left them all speechless. Sometimes the ones you look down on are standing far above you. Sometimes the person you humiliate is the one holding the power to change your world forever. This is the story of a woman mocked as a servant, and the moment that turned her shame into glory. And today it is being retold by me. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please, subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. The Heiress family home looked warm and welcoming from the outside. It had white curtains on every window and flower pots lined neatly along the porch. Anyone passing by would think it was a house filled with love and laughter. But behind those doors, Emily Carter knew the truth was far colder. She stood at the entrance, clutching the gift she had brought, a bottle of fine wine. It wasn't expensive, at least not compared to the kind of things she could really afford, but she had chosen carefully. She wanted to appear normal. She wanted them to like her for who she was, not for what she had. Daniel, her fiancé, reached out and squeezed her hand. "Relax," he said with a smile. "They like you." Emily returned the smile but said nothing. Deep down, she wasn't so sure. She had seen the way Margaret Heiress, Daniel's mother, looked at her sometimes. There was always a hint of suspicion in her eyes, like she was searching for a flaw. Inside, the smell of roast chicken and garlic bread filled the air. The table was already set with shining cutlery and neatly folded napkins. Richard Heiress, Daniel's father, greeted Emily with a wide smile and a hug that seemed too friendly for someone who barely knew her. Chloe, Daniel's younger sister, clapped her hands together and said, "Oh, look who's here, the bride-to-be." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes carried mischief. "Emily, dear," Margaret said, brushing past her with a cold kiss on the cheek. "Put that wine on the counter, will you? Then you can help me with the plates. Dinner's almost ready." Emily froze for a second. Guests were never asked to set the table, but she nodded politely. "Of course, Mrs. Heiress." She walked into the kitchen, placed the wine on the counter, and picked up the plates. Chloe followed her, smirking. "Careful with those," Chloe whispered, loud enough for her to hear. "We wouldn't want you to break anything. These aren't the kind of dishes you're used to, I'm sure." Emily bit her lip but said nothing. She carried the plates to the dining room and began setting them out carefully. At dinner, everyone laughed and talked. Everyone except Emily. She stayed quiet, listening, smiling politely whenever someone made eye contact. Richard told a story about work, Chloe gossiped about her friends, and Margaret went on about how hard it was to manage a household. Suddenly, Margaret turned to Emily. "So, Emily, what exactly do you do? I mean, besides, being with Daniel?" "I work with a small foundation," Emily answered softly. "We focus on supporting education for underprivileged children." "Oh, that's nice," Margaret said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "So not much money in that, I assume?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but he didn't say anything. Emily forced a small smile. "It's not about the money. It's about making a difference." Chloe laughed. "Well, as long as Daniel is okay with being the one who pays for everything, I guess it's fine." Emily's cheeks burned. She glanced at Daniel, hoping he would speak up, defend her, but he only laughed nervously and changed the subject. After dinner, as the family stood up, Margaret clapped her hands. Don't just stand there, Emily. Clear the plates. If you want to marry into this family, you need to first learn your place as a servant. The words hit Emily like a slap. The room went quiet for a moment, then Chloe giggled, and Richard looked away as if he hadn't heard. Daniel scratched the back of his neck, then let out a nervous chuckle. Mom, don't be so harsh, he said. But there was no real defense in his voice. He looked at Emily, as if to say, just do it, it's easier that way. Emily picked up the plates one by one. Her hands trembled, but she kept her head down. Inside, her heart was breaking. Chloe leaned against the wall, arms crossed, smirking. You know, Emily, you're actually pretty good at this. Maybe we should hire you as the maid even if you don't marry Daniel. Emily said nothing. She carried the plates into the kitchen, set them by the sink, and took a deep breath. She wanted to scream, to shout the truth, that she wasn't the poor girl they thought she was, that she could buy this entire house and everything in it with a single check. But she stayed silent. Her silence was her armor. For now, when she returned to the living room, Margaret handed her a rag. Wipe down the table. Then you can bring us coffee. Daniel sat on the couch, flipping through his phone, not meeting her eyes. Emily forced herself to nod. Of course, Mrs. Heiress. As she wiped the table, Chloe whispered, she's actually doing it. Wow. No pride at all. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to walk out, but she reminded herself, patience. There would come a time when the truth would shine. For now, she had to endure. Emily carried the steaming cups of coffee into the living room. The rich aroma filled the air. But, to her, it smelled like smoke from a fire she couldn't escape. She placed the first cup in front of Richard, who smiled politely. Thank you, Emily, he said, though his eyes darted back to the TV as if she were just background noise. Chloe clapped her hands together. Oh, be careful with mine. I like extra sugar. Don't spill it. Her tone was sharp, like she was testing a maid, not speaking to her brother's fiancé. Emily held her tongue and handed Chloe her cup. She smiled faintly, even though her stomach was tight. When she placed Margaret's coffee on the table, Margaret didn't even look up. 2 creams. Did you remember? Yes, Mrs. Heiress, Emily said softly. Good. At least you can follow instructions. Margaret's voice cut like ice. Emily sat down on the edge of the armchair, quiet as a shadow. She felt Daniel's eyes on her for a second, but when she looked his way, he quickly turned back to his phone. He never said a word. The family chatted casually, laughing at jokes Emily didn't understand. Every time she tried to join the conversation, Chloe interrupted or brushed her off. Finally, Chloe leaned forward, smirking. So, Emily, I've been wondering, where exactly did Daniel meet you? You're not exactly from, our circle. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Chloe, don't start. But Margaret smiled, amused. No, it's a fair question. Daniel, where did you meet her? Daniel cleared his throat. At a charity event. She was volunteering. A volunteer? Chloe repeated, laughing softly. That explains a lot. Emily's hands clenched together on her lap. She wanted to disappear. Margaret leaned closer. Emily, dear, marriage is a serious thing. Daniel comes from a respectable family. We expect his wife to know her place. Do you understand that? Yes, Mrs. Heiress, Emily said quietly. Good. Margaret's smile was thin and sharp. Because love is sweet, but it doesn't keep a household running. A wife must know how to serve. Emily nodded, her chest burning. She swallowed the lump in her throat. Chloe tilted her head. Do you even know how to cook? I mean, properly cook? Not just instant noodles or takeout. Emily forced a smile. Yes, I can cook. Prove it, Chloe said quickly, her eyes glittering. Tomorrow night. Why don't you make dinner? For all of us? Then we'll see what you're really worth. Margaret's lips curved upward. That's an excellent idea. Yes, Emily, cook us dinner tomorrow. Let's call it a test. Daniel looked up, finally speaking. Is that really necessary? Yes, Margaret snapped. If she wants to be part of this family, she has to show she can take care of it. Emily's heart pounded. She could order the finest chefs to her home if she wanted, but here she was being told to prove herself like a servant. I'll do it, Emily said. Her voice steady though her hands trembled in her lap. Chloe grinned. This is going to be fun. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Emily stood in the guest room staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was still neatly pinned, her dress unwrinkled, her face calm. But her eyes told the truth. They burned with humiliation. Why am I enduring this? She asked herself. Why don't I just walk away? But deep down, Emily knew why. She wasn't just marrying Daniel. She was testing him. She wanted to see if his love was real, if he could stand by her when his family pushed her down. So far, the answer was painful. She thought of her true life, her family name, her wealth, the empire she had quietly inherited but never flaunted. She had chosen silence, chosen humility, because she wanted love without conditions. But now, she wondered if silence had only invited cruelty. Emily pressed her palm against the glass, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger. Tomorrow would be another test, another chance for them to humiliate her. But tomorrow would also bring her one step closer to the breaking point. And when that moment came, when she finally revealed the truth, none of them would forget it. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and how did this story speak to you? Emily stood at the stove in the Heiress kitchen, stirring the sauce carefully. The smell of herbs and garlic filled the air. She had worked all afternoon preparing the meal Margaret demanded she cook a full dinner for the family. She wanted everything to be perfect. She wasn't used to cooking like this anymore. Back in her own world, her family had chefs and staff, but Emily had grown up watching her grandmother cook, learning the patience behind every dish. She could do this. She would do this. Careful not to burn it. Chloe's voice rang from behind. Emily turned to see her leaning against the counter, arms crossed, smirking. Wouldn't want to poison us on your first try. Emily kept her voice calm. It won't burn. It's on low heat. Chloe rolled her eyes. Relax. I was joking. Well, kind of. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You know what Mom calls you? The maid. Fitz doesn't it? Emily's heart tightened, but she forced a smile. If that makes her happy, she can call me what she likes. Chloe laughed loudly, shaking her head. You're too easy, Emily. Too quiet. No wonder Daniel doesn't defend you. You make it easy for everyone to walk all over you. Emily stirred the sauce again, saying nothing. But inside, the words cut deep. Dinner was quiet at first. Richard complimented the food. This is good, Emily. You cooked this yourself. Yes, Emily said softly. Margaret sniffed. It's fine. A bit salty, though. But I suppose for someone who doesn't have much experience in a proper kitchen, it's decent. Emily lowered her eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Heiress. Chloe snorted into her glass. The maid passes her first test. Daniel chuckled, but nervously. He didn't stop Chloe. He didn't stop his mother either. Emily's stomach knotted. She tried to focus on her plate, but Margaret wasn't done. So tell me, Emily, Margaret said sharply, what do you really bring into this marriage? Daniel has his career. He has his connections. What do you have? Emily swallowed hard. I bring myself, Mrs. Heiress, my support, my love for Daniel. Love doesn't pay bills, Margaret said coldly. Love doesn't build a home. I think you're here because you see potential in my son. You want what he has. That's all. Mother, Daniel said softly, trying to laugh it off. Don't say that. But he didn't really deny it. He didn't defend her. He just looked away. Emily felt a lump in her throat. She stayed silent, but her heart screamed. A week later, Emily found herself walking past Daniel's office downtown. She had planned to surprise him with lunch. She carried a small bag with sandwiches she'd made. As she approached the glass doors, she heard laughter. Daniel's voice, then another voice, woman's, light and teasing. Curious, Emily paused near the corner, out of sight. She's lucky I chose her, Daniel was saying, his voice low but clear. I mean, look at her. She should be grateful. My parents are right. She doesn't bring much to the table. Emily froze. Her chest tightened as if someone had struck her. You're too kind, Daniel, the woman replied. If I were you, I wouldn't settle for someone like her. Emily peeked through the glass. Her stomach dropped. Sitting across from Daniel was Sophie, his ex-girlfriend. The one he had told her was in the past. Sophie leaned closer, her manicured hand brushing Daniel's arm. He didn't pull away. Emily felt her breath catch. She pressed her back against the wall, clutching the bag of sandwiches. So tightly her knuckles turned white. Her fiancé, the man she loved, talking about her like she was nothing. Her mind screamed at her to walk in, to confront him, to throw the sandwiches at his face. But her legs wouldn't move. She turned and walked away, every step heavier than the last. That weekend, Margaret invited Sophie over. Emily stared in disbelief when she opened the door to find Sophie standing there, smiling smugly. Oh, Emily, Sophie said sweetly, brushing past her. So good to see you again. Emily's hands trembled, but she forced a polite smile. Hello, Sophie. Margaret appeared from the living room, her face lighting up. Sophie, darling, come in, come in. It's been too long. Chloe bounded down the stairs, clapping her hands. Finally, someone interesting is here. Emily stood there, stunned. Why is she here? She asked quietly. Margaret turned to her, her smile sharp. She's family to us, Emily. She's always welcome. You don't mind, do you? Emily's chest ached, but she shook her head. Of course not. At dinner, Sophie sat beside Daniel, laughing at his jokes, touching his arm as if Emily didn't exist. The family encouraged it, laughing along, acting as though Sophie were the real bride-to-be. Emily tried to eat, but every bite turned to stone in her mouth. Finally, Sophie looked across the table, her eyes locked on Emily. You know, Daniel and I used to talk about our future together. Funny how life works out, isn't it? Chloe laughed. Maybe you'll still have that future. Who knows? Margaret smirked. Sophie certainly would be a better match. Same class, same background. Not like... She trailed off, her eyes sliding toward Emily with disdain. Emily set down her fork slowly. Not like me, she finished quietly. Nobody denied it. Not even Daniel. He simply lowered his gaze, silent, guilty, but not enough to stop Sophie's hand resting on his. That night, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Why am I enduring this? She asked herself again. Why am I letting them break me piece by piece? She turned her head to look at Daniel, sleeping peacefully beside her, his phone buzzing on the nightstand. She reached for it, her hands trembling. The screen lit up. Messages from Sophie. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Dinner was fun. I love how your mom adores me. She'll never be enough for you, Daniel. We both know that. Emily's chest tightened, her breath shallow. She set the phone down slowly, quietly. Her tears dried, replaced by something colder, stronger, resolve. If they thought she was weak, if they thought she was powerless, they were wrong. They had no idea who she really was. But soon they would. And when that day came, their laughter would die in their throats. The Heiress home buzzed with preparations. The engagement party was set for Saturday evening, and Margaret moved through the rooms like a queen directing her court. Flowers were arranged, lights strung, and tables covered in fine linens. But Emily noticed something strange. Every detail was handled by Margaret and Chloe with Sophie by their side. Nobody asked Emily for her input. Nobody even mentioned her name. It was supposed to be her engagement party, her night. But as she watched Sophie laugh with Chloe about the decorations, Emily realized she was only a shadow in the background. "Emily," Margaret called sharply. "Come here. I have a task for you." Emily stepped forward. "Yes, Mrs. Heiress?" Margaret handed her a long list. "The caterer canceled at the last minute. So you'll be cooking for 50 guests. That will show us what you're truly capable of." Emily blinked. 50 guests? By myself. Margaret smiled thinly. "Of course. You've proven you can manage in the kitchen. Think of it as a test of your commitment." Chloe snickered. "Don't worry, Mom. She's practically the maid anyway. She'll manage." Emily felt her chest tighten, but she nodded. "I'll do it." Inside, her heart sank. They weren't testing her. They were trying to humiliate her in front of everyone. The night of the party, Emily worked silently in the kitchen, preparing trays of food while laughter filled the house. From the dining room, she heard Sophie's bright voice carrying above the chatter. "Daniel and I used to host parties like this back in college. He's such a wonderful partner." Emily froze for a moment, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Partner." Sophie said it like Emily didn't exist, like she wasn't the one wearing the ring. She kept moving, carrying plates into the dining room. Guests glanced at her with confusion. Some whispered. She could hear bits of it. "Isn't that Daniel's fiancée? Why is she serving? Strange family." But Margaret only smiled and announced, "Emily loves to help." She insisted. Daniel laughed softly, arm resting on the back of Sophie's chair. He didn't correct his mother. He didn't defend Emily. Later, as Emily poured wine for the guests, Chloe stepped in front of her, grinning wickedly. "Oops," she said, bumping Emily's elbow on purpose. The red wine spilled across Emily's pale dress, staining it in a dark splash. Gasps filled the room. Chloe clapped her hand over her mouth, fake innocence dripping from her voice. "Oh no, Emily, you're so clumsy." Laughter erupted. Sophie smirked, her eyes glittering with delight. Daniel looked at Emily, but instead of helping, he turned to Sophie and whispered something that made her laugh. Emily stood frozen, her dress ruined, humiliation burning through her veins. She wanted to scream. She wanted to walk out and never return. But she forced herself to smile faintly. "It's only a dress," she said softly, before retreating to the kitchen. Behind her, the laughter continued. In the quiet of the kitchen, Emily pressed her hands against the counter, her body shaking. She looked down at the wine-soaked fabric. "They want to break me," she thought. "They want me to fall apart." But she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Not yet. That night, long after the guests had gone, Emily passed by the study. She stopped when she heard voices inside. Margaret's sharp tone, Sophie's soft laugh. "Once Daniel marries you," Margaret was saying, "we'll be rid of Emily for good. She's nothing but a servant girl anyway. She should have never been here." Sophie laughed. "I'll make sure of it. Don't worry." Emily's blood ran cold. She pressed a hand to the doorframe, her knees threatening to give out. They were plotting this together, with Daniel's silence, with his approval. Tears welled in her eyes, but she wiped them quickly. This wasn't the time to cry. It was the time to decide. And in that moment, Emily knew her silence was almost over. Emily lay awake in the guest room, the sound of Sophie's laughter still echoing in her ears. Daniel slept soundly down the hall. The same man who had promised to love her, who had sworn he wanted a future with her, had let his family and his ex strip her of every ounce of dignity. She stared at the ceiling, her chest heavy. She thought of her grandmother's words. "Sometimes, silence is the sharpest blade. Let them believe they've won, until it's too late." Emily closed her eyes and drew a long breath. She wouldn't fight them tonight. She wouldn't fight them tomorrow. But soon, very soon, they would learn who she really was. The next morning, Chloe walked into the kitchen where Emily sat with a cup of tea. "Wow," Chloe said, grinning. "You really took that wine incident like a champ. I thought you'd cry." Emily looked up calmly. "Why would I cry?" "Because you embarrassed yourself in front of 50 people. Chloe laughed. "Honestly, I almost felt bad for you. Almost." Emily sipped her tea. "I don't embarrass easily." Chloe frowned. "That's weird. Normal girls would have left by now." "Maybe I'm not normal," Emily said softly. The answer unsettled Chloe. She frowned, then walked away. Later that afternoon, Margaret found Emily folding napkins in the dining room. "You did well last night," Margaret said flatly. "At least you didn't make a scene. That's one thing you're good for. Staying quiet." Emily smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mrs. Heiress." Margaret leaned closer, her voice sharp. "Don't think silence makes you strong. It makes you weak. And once Sophie is officially with Daniel, you'll have nothing left." Emily held her gaze. "We'll see." Margaret's eyes narrowed, but Emily didn't look away. For the first time, she saw something flicker in Margaret's expression, a hint of unease. That evening, Emily stood in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and gold. She held her phone in her hand, scrolling through messages from her private assistant. "Everything is ready," the last message read. "We'll move when you give the signal." Emily locked the screen and slipped the phone into her pocket. Her time of silence was ending. She turned back toward the house, her ruined dress still hanging by the laundry line, the stain of humiliation dark and ugly. She looked at it once, then smiled faintly. "They think they've broken me, but they've only prepared me." The breaking point had come, and soon so would her revenge. The Heiress mansion sparkled that evening. Chandeliers glowed, champagne glasses clinked, and guests in glittering gowns filled the grand hall. It was supposed to be Emily's engagement party, but as she stood near the corner of the room, unnoticed, she realized she was nothing more than a shadow at her own celebration. All eyes were on Sophie. She moved through the crowd like a queen, her red dress shimmering under the lights. She laughed, loudly, tossing her hair back, her hand brushing Daniel's arm as if it belonged there. Daniel didn't pull away. In fact, he leaned toward her, whispering in her ear, making her laugh even harder. Margaret stood proudly by Sophie's side, introducing her to guests as though she were her son's bride-to-be. Chloe trailed behind them, giggling and adding snide comments whenever someone glanced at Emily. Emily remained calm, a glass of water in her hand, her face serene, but inside her chest was burning. This was no longer humiliation, it was a mockery. "Emily," one guest whispered, frowning. "Aren't you the fiancé? Why is she?" Before they could finish, Margaret stepped forward and raised her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. We are celebrating Daniel's future. His future with someone who truly matches him, who understands his world." Her hand swept toward Sophie. The room filled with applause. Emily's fingers tightened around her glass, but she didn't move. She waited. Sophie smiled sweetly and leaned into Daniel. "Well," she said loudly, "we should all be grateful. Daniel didn't end up with just anyone. Not every girl is fit to stand by a man like him." Chloe burst out laughing. "Especially not the maid." Gasps rippled through the guests. Some glanced at Emily with pity, others with curiosity. Daniel smirked, his arms sliding around Sophie's waist. "They're right," he said. His voice was smooth, cruel. "I made my choice, and some people should just accept it." Emily set her glass down gently. Her movements were calm, deliberate. She stepped forward into the center of the room. "Enough." The word was quiet but sharp. The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Emily lifted her chin. Her voice carried, clear and strong. "For weeks, I have stood here quietly. Cooked, I cleaned, I served. I let myself be mocked, insulted, humiliated. And all of you thought my silence meant weakness." She paused, her gaze sweeping across Margaret, Chloe, Daniel, and Sophie. But tonight I will no longer stay silent. The crowd murmured. Daniel frowned, stepping forward. Emily, don't cause a scene. Emily's lips curved into a faint smile. No, Daniel. You caused the scene the moment you paraded your mistress in front of your fiancé. You humiliated me in my own engagement party. And you thought I would accept it. Sophie scoffed, folding her arms. Oh, please. Everyone knows you're not fit for him. You should be grateful he even looked your way. Emily's eyes turned to Sophie. Grateful? That's the word Daniel used too. Isn't it? That I should be grateful he chose me. That I brought nothing to the table. Daniel's face paled. You heard that? Emily nodded. I heard everything. And tonight, everyone else will hear the truth too. She straightened her shoulders, her calmness radiating through the silence. My name is Emily Carter, heir to the Carter Corporation. Gasps filled the hall. Glasses slipped from hands, landing with sharp crashes on the marble floor. Whispering erupted like wildfire. The Carter Corporation? Someone muttered. That's a multi-billion-dollar empire. She's the Carter heiress? My God. They treated her like a servant? Emily let the shock ripple through the room. She continued, her voice steady. While you mocked me, while you called me a maid, while you accused me of chasing wealth, I was the one who had it all along. More than you could ever imagine. Margaret staggered back, her face white. This can't be true. One of the guests stepped forward. It is true. The Carters own half the city's businesses. Everyone knows their name. All eyes turned to Margaret. Her lips trembled. She clutched the edge of the table, her body swaying. Chloe's mouth hung open, her face red with shame. Sophie's smirk vanished. She stumbled back, her eyes darting nervously. And Daniel's face drained of all color. He reached for Emily's arm. Emily, wait. You should have told me. I didn't know. Emily pulled her arm away. Her voice was cold as steel. No, Daniel. You did know who I was. You just never cared who I was. You cared only for what I could do for you. You thought I was beneath you. And so did your family. Gasps spread again as Emily pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. Messages and photos appeared on the large projector that lit up behind her. Images of Daniel and Sophie together. Text messages full of flirtation and betrayal. The guests erupted in shock. Unbelievable. He cheated on her? And with Sophie of all people? Business partners whispered furiously, shaking their heads. One muttered, if he can't be loyal to his fiancée, how can we trust him in business? Richard, Daniel's father, buried his face in his hands, humiliated. Margaret swayed again, clutching her chest. This can't be happening. Chloe covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Not from pity, but from sheer disgrace. Sophie stomped her heel, her voice sharp. This isn't fair. You think money makes you better than us? Emily turned to her, calm as ever. No, money doesn't make me better, but character does. And you've all shown yours. Daniel fell to his knees in front of her, his voice desperate. Emily, please, forgive me. I was wrong. I see it now. You're the woman I love, not Sophie. Please, don't leave me. The room held its breath. Every guest leaned forward, waiting. Emily looked down at him, her eyes cold. You mistook my kindness for weakness. You saw a servant when you should have seen a queen. And queens do not beg, nor do they forgive betrayal. Daniel's face crumpled. Sophie let out a cry of rage and stormed out, her heels clattering against the marble. Margaret collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling. Chloe stood frozen, speechless. Emily turned to the crowd. Thank you all for coming tonight. This party was supposed to be a celebration of love. Instead, it became a lesson. Never judge someone by how they appear. Never. Look down on the quiet, the humble, the kind. Because sometimes the one you step on is the one who holds the power to change your fate. She placed her glass down on the table, her posture straight, her dignity unshaken. Tonight, I leave not as their servant, not as Daniel's fiancée, but as Emily Carter, free, strong, and unbroken. And with that, she walked out of the room, her heels echoing against the marble, her head held high. Not once did she look back. The guests whispered furiously behind her, some in awe, others in shame. But Emily didn't care. For the first time in weeks, she breathed freely. Her silence had ended. Her revenge was complete, and her dignity, once torn apart, had been restored in full.